Well, let's take a look now at the markets in Kenya, and firstly at the NSE 20, 28.8 points off there to 4839, and that was a shift there if you look over the 1 month of just 0.59%. Banking sector active there, KCB 0.35 million shares, down 0.61%. Standard Chartered saw increased demand, and the top mover there was Safaricom. Trading shares worth 100 million shillings. Foreigners involved there to the tune of 90% of the activity. And then the shilling, as we've been saying, that has tended to be steady, particularly since that election. The central bank involvement not so great, and standing at 83.9 there, and 0.24% is the shift there. Well, let's have a look at those boards again, just to see, summarize what the Kenyan market is doing. Sorry, I said Kenya there. Of course, it was the JSE, just looking at the boards ahead of the opening in about 15 minutes' time, and the various sectors there on the JSE. We'll be looking at those in a bit more detail a bit later. Now we go to that Kenyan market update. I gave you the summary of what the exchange has been doing, and we go to Moses Waireri, who is Head of Research at Sterling Capital. Good morning, Moses. Perhaps just first of all, your overall view of what the market's been doing?
Thank you, David. The market has, it's basically reversing. We've been seeing a downward trend, started close at 48, 38 levels, but we still believe there is a support level at about 4,700. And we still expect this momentum to continue throughout the over the next few days, over the next few weeks, as investors continually book their gains and profits.
Well, I suppose that's how the market should normally work, and it was a bit distorted by that tension over the election previously. Perhaps talk about Safaricom. We do talk about it a lot, but it is an interesting share. Big trade yesterday, foreigners accounting for 90% of the activity in Safaricom. What's driving the latest activity? I mean, it is a share, obviously, that normally attracts a lot of interest.
With Safaricom, it's basically the upcoming earnings announcement, which will be on the 14th of May. Basically, investors are very, very bullish about the earnings going forward. We believe that through M-Pesa and the data, the amount of money that we invested in those two, we believe that those two will be the key drivers of the top line going forward. We've also, we as Sterling project an EPS growth to about 0.41, and we believe that Safaricom should be trading at levels of about 6 shillings 90 cents.
They talk about less regulatory risk and a landscape that looks more stable and predictable, meaning the telecoms landscape. So less regulation, more stability. That sounds good for the sector as a whole.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We've seen the volatility of caused by the price wars, which it has declined. We've seen that all regulators, all participants, all industry participants and players are looking at innovative ways of growing their top lines, because some of Safaricom's competitors have been making losses over the past few years. So they're looking at ways of turning those losses into profits. So they're looking at getting into the data space as well. They're looking at other innovative ways, because the voice division in the telecommunications industry is getting at a maturing stage.
Perhaps another question to ask is the sector competitive enough, with Safaricom having a 77% market share? Of course, that's good for investors if market share translates into profits and growth. Maybe not good for consumers in the long run, because there's not enough competition.
Yes, you do bring up a very good point there. Yes, Safaricom is the largest, it holds the largest market share in the telecoms space. But we believe that Safaricom is a pioneer in this industry. It's one of the biggest financiers, or one of the biggest creative forces behind the innovative products in the mobile space, which we've seen have been adopted in the business space, the financial sector services. So the fact that it is the largest market shareholder, thus less competition, we believe that the counter to that, it brings a lot of innovative and creative products into the market, which helps the consumers as well.
Okay, let's move on to the oil sector. An interesting report on executive pay at Kennel Coble, dropping 22% in a year, executive pay down. But share-based compensation is an issue there. So what's happening in that, and would investors take an interest in this kind of issue in Kenya?
Yes, definitely. Investors will take a lot of interest because the company reported the largest ever recorded loss for a listed company, and yet they managed to pay the executive directors 62 million shillings. That doesn't go down well with investors. It doesn't make sense to them. And we believe this will have an impact on the share price. We've seen it trading at levels of 10.30, 10.20 yesterday. And we believe at current levels, the share might even drag down to 10 shillings. Probably by next week.
Yeah, it says that the chief executive is still free to exercise an options agreement that allows him to receive 20 million shares. So clearly when a company is apparently the biggest loss ever by a company on the exchange.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you see that if the executive decides to exercise that option, we'll see a lot of dilution in that shares, and we'll see the Kennel Coble share price taking a dive, basically.
Let's just finish off there with the banking sector, Moses. KCB active yesterday, Standard Chartered and National Bank. And I was talking to one of your colleagues earlier in the week about the synergies between Safaricom, which we started talking with, and that banking sector. Yeah. Each of them relying and will be stimulated by growth in the other.
Yes, that's true. We've seen a lot of collusion between the telecoms and the financial services sector. I still believe that the banking sector is currently overheated, and we do expect a correction in that segment with a majority of the counters. They are trading at very high PEs and therefore very expensive. The collusion between or the partnership between Safaricom and some of these banking sectors is basically the financial services companies or constituents taking advantage of the number of M-Pesa agents that Safaricom can offer, and vis-a-vis the number of clientele that they can offer, that they have at their disposal. Therefore, banks are looking at this method or this methodology as a way of improving financial inclusion in the country and as a way of getting that extra back.